Hello, I'm Matt Galloway, and this is the Current Podcast. As war in the Middle East expands, the Prime Minister said last week he is not ruling out Canada's involvement.
One can never categorically rule out participation. We will stand by our allies when it makes sense. There's a distinction between the offensive actions that were taken and are being taken by the United States and Israel, that were taken by them without consultation with Canada, with other allies, and we're not party to those actions. But we will always defend Canadians. We will always stand by and defend our allies when called upon.
On Saturday, Mark Carney said that Canada has yet to be called upon. There have been no requests for help from our allies yet. All of this unfolded during the Prime Minister's 10-day trip to India, Australia, and Japan, a trip to drum up new trade deals. At the same time, the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, was on his own international trip with stops in the United Kingdom and Germany. And yesterday, 3 by-elections were announced for the 13th of April. If the Liberals win all 3, they would get the technical minimum for a majority government. Our National Affairs panel is here to sift through all of this. Rosemary Barton, the CBC's chief political correspondent and host of Rosemary Barton Live. Stephanie Levitz is a senior reporter in the Globe and Mail's Ottawa Bureau. And Ryan Tumulty is a political reporter with the Toronto Star. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Rosie, you called Mark Carney's position on the war in the Middle East an evolving message. How well has he communicated that message to Canadians?
I mean, by the end of the trade mission, better than, a few days in. I think there was some sort of rush or reflex to respond very quickly to what had happened, started 10 days ago. And it was in a statement that was lacking nuance and not really reflecting what would typically be Canada's position in moments like this. And by typically, I mean reflecting that Canada expects parties to still follow international rules and laws when it comes to conflicts and war. I don't know exactly why that happened so quickly and why it was lacking that nuance. By the time he actually spoke, the Prime Minister, which was 3 or 4 days after that statement was released, the position was much more detailed, much more nuanced, called for all of those things. I think the problem is not only does that lead Canadians to be confused about what his position is, but it also has left some of his caucus members confused. And that is something that I think they started to clean up last week on Friday when Anita Anand had a briefing for caucus members, and that they're going to have to continue to do today. I think it partly explains also why it's the Liberals now offering to have an emergency debate about the war in Iran later today, because they need to get some of this stuff sort of tidied away so that it doesn't seem like in some way Canada is supporting exactly what the United States and Israel are doing.
Steph, do you want to pick up on that? The NDP called the initial statement, unprincipled, incoherent, and confusing. You had pushback, to Rosie's point, for the Prime Minister from some members of his own caucus. He later said that he supported the war with regret. Where does that leave the Prime Minister?
There's been a question, don't you think, ever since Mr. Carney became leader of the Liberal Party, which is exactly a year ago today, about is Mr. Carney a Liberal? What does it mean to Mr. Carney to be a Liberal? And for Liberals, the nuanced statement, the hedging, the if this, then that was classic sort of Liberal playbook foreign policy. That's how statements would be crafted. They'd be workshopped. They'd be focus group. They would look at every single political lens they could possibly apply to something. Mr. Carney doesn't operate like that. And in a situation where there are folks within the Liberal Party, the Liberal movement, the Liberal caucus who are looking at this statement and saying this is offside with our values as Liberals, that's where Mr. Carney runs into trouble. And I think there are lots of folks who praised his original statement for being declarative, for not nuanced, for not hedging.
That it didn't sound like something that a politician would say.
Exactly. It was seen by some, right, like it or not like it. It was clear. There was clarity attached to it. And Canada has long been criticized under Justin Trudeau's government for having foreign policy that wasn't exactly clear. What do we actually mean? Then, Mr. Carney, a few days later, sort of that with regret comment That's like, well, then did you mean it or didn't you mean it? And I would submit that there are probably, as much as there are folks in the Liberal caucus who are uncomfortable with the position, the original position, there are others who are saying, well, wait, I thought we were taking like a decisive stand on this. What happened to that?
Ryan, the Prime Minister said that he spoke with U.S. President Donald Trump yesterday about the war and other matters. As Rosie mentioned, the Liberals are proposing an emergency debate on this tonight. You have the Conservatives who are also proposing their own debate, which would be about what they call the global energy crisis. What does the Prime Minister need to do now, particularly when it comes to politics, but also in speaking to Canadians about this issue?
Yeah, I think there's definitely this need for clarity, and I think this debate tonight might finally bring that. I think he's also got to be clear about what he can't be clear about. And that's because we don't know what the U.S. and Israel's plans are in this war. We don't know how far they intend to extend this. Apparently, Donald Trump is thinking about ground troops in Iran, which is a whole other level to this conflict. He seems to seriously be considering regime change, even though a few times he said he wouldn't do that. So there's a real shifting position here on the war by its belligerents. And I think it's going to be difficult for Mr. Carney to rule things in or out because these things are going to keep shifting all along. When he said that we wouldn't be involved militarily, I'm not sure he anticipated that Iran would be launching attacks against allies in the region that had nothing to do with this conflict, at least initially. So it's going to be difficult for him, I think, to have a position and be able to stick to it.
Rosie, what do you think Canadians are looking to hear from the Prime Minister? Maybe it's coming out of this debate or more broadly. And I ask this in part because they're waking up on a Monday morning with gas prices spiking once again. And that's just the beginning of it. There are Canadians who have ties there, deep ties to the region, families across that region as well. So what are Canadians looking to hear from the Prime Minister and his government?
Well, first of all, I don't think they're going to hear from the Prime Minister today. It's my understanding that he won't be at least as of this moment, is not planning to be at that debate later today. So that's interesting. Listen, I think a couple of things. I think they want to know that there's a plan to get Canadians out of the region, if they want to get out of the region, and that is starting to take shape over the past few days, and we're sort of getting regular information about that. I also think they want to know that the Prime Minister and the government are not going to align themselves with the United States for other reasons. And by other reasons, I mean trade negotiations and trying to make sure that we have a relationship with the United States that still works.
And is there the whiff of that initial statement perhaps was directed to an audience of one?
I think there's the whiff of it. I'm not sure that I would suggest that that's what was going on, but I think that it is something in the back of people's minds, right? That there is some real politic going on in the Prime Minister's mind as he tries to hedge and figure out, what makes sense in this moment. But I think honestly that his position is what he said at Davos. It is what he has said over that mission again, that we take the world as it is, not as it should be. That's the line that he likes. And I think there is truth to it. But I don't think that he put himself and his government in a great position over the past week or so by suggesting that there was something else that Canada was looking for here. And I think that, Ryan's right. There's always the prospect of being drawn into things because you need to protect NATO partners or other allies in the region. But I don't think, and I think everyone would agree with me, that Canadians are interested in getting involved in a regional conflict in the Middle East. And that's the thing that he needs to be really, really clear about for Canadians. But that might not be possible because of all the things that we've talked about. We don't know how this is going to unfold, and we certainly don't know what the U.S. president has in mind.
Steph, all of this unfolds as the Prime Minister is on the road, this 10-day trip to India, Australia, and Japan for trade talks. While out in that world, he signed deals worth billions of dollars. What do you think he was trying to accomplish, and did he do that?
I mean, I think to a certain extent, you've got to break the trip into parts, right? The reset with India was pretty fundamental for Mr. Carney's agenda, some kind of restoration of relations. Of course, that was dogged in the early days by this looming question of whether India still meddles in our business here in Canada. And I don't know, some messy messaging coming out of the government on that score that undercut that trip. And then you have, Australia's about like-minded middle powers. It's about, we are united under the Commonwealth. Let's use our own heft to work together to do more things. And then Japan's raw economics, right? It's growing the Canadian footprint in that part of the world. It's about Japanese auto investment. So it's almost like, diplomatic, and then we're straight economic, like in a sort of line like that for Mr. Carney. The challenge becomes, and it will continue to be with him, as we've talked about on this program so many times, the deliverable. The part in which all of this stuff pays off for Canada. And I'm thinking, Matt, for example, about, when he went over to the Middle East prior to the hostilities breaking out, and he went to the UAE and he went to Qatar, and he announced triumphantly billions of dollars of investment from that part of the world into the Canadian economy. Well, now a war has broken out over there. And our UAE investors, how are they feeling? What about the Qataris? Do they actually want to put their money in the Canadian economy right now, or do they need it to buy missiles to defend themselves? I don't know. And so this plan that Mr. Carney has to diversify our economy, well, I think everyone around him, not like every partisan group would say, great idea, let's do it. It gets complicated by world factors. And then you have folks like everybody taking their kids back to school this morning, looking at gas prices and going, holy moly.
Or perhaps using stronger language.
I would say it's just, we're on the radio. I'm not going to.
This is a family program.
Beef myself out. Holy beef and holy beef, and he's going to, that's the part. That's the risk of all of his international positions and his chasing of international investment dollars is that those are long game plays and the short-term pain for Canadians remain.
Ryan, Steph mentioned the India trip, which got a lot of attention in part because of the looming questions around foreign interference. There was a government official who provided a briefing before the trip began saying that's all over and done with. And then the Prime Minister, after he left India, said that he wouldn't use those words. Did he thread that needle, do you think?
I'm not sure that he did, because I think there's still plenty of confusion about where all of this stands. And I think that's going to linger, and that's going to be a problem, because there's a significant Sikh community in this country that's deeply concerned about India's meddling here. There are all the national security agencies who are pretty much agreed that that is still an ongoing concern. I think maybe it might have tapped that down while he was in India and allowed him to sort of sidestep those issues and focus on the trade front, which is something probably we're going to have to do with a lot of countries now, ignore some part of our relationship and worry about trade because of our faltering relationship with the U.S. But I still think that's going to linger. And I think there are people in communities who are wondering, is he going to protect our interests unless there's a good trade deal to be had. And that's a real problem.
Of note, Pierre Poilievre, Conservative leader, was also out on the road traveling to Germany and the United Kingdom. Steph, what was he trying to do with that trip?
Trying to sort of flip the switch in people's minds about Mr. Poilievre, leader of the official opposition, to Mr. Poilievre, international statesman and man of mystery, to give him some of that sheen that comes from travel, that sophistication, that sense that, okay, we can picture him on the world stage advocating for Canadian interests.
This is the great reset that people have been talking about?
Yeah, I was listening to his speeches and listening to what he was saying over there. And I don't know, reset might almost be the right word, because it's like back to basics for Mr. Poilievre. I was thinking a lot about the speech he gave where he sort of talked about the arc of conservative thinking and free market ideology. And that was in some ways vintage Pierre, like diving deep into the meaning of all of this and the philosophy around it. That's a far cry from the eating an apple in an orchard video, So it's interesting. The timing of it, not unfortunately for him, with the war breaking out, I don't know that his travels got the attention domestically that they deserved. I think the question, and should he take questions from reporters, it would be fascinating to know what he takes away from all of this. Like, I understand that he gets the clips on social media, and I understand that he gets to talk to folks that are like-minded in Britain and in Germany and sort of be part of that international conservative consortium. But travel changes a person. Travel helps you grow, hopefully, see the world a little bit differently, expose yourself to new ideas. That's part of the point. Did he come away with any of that? And I'll be really interested to see if there's a yes to that answer.
Just in the last few minutes that we have, we saw yesterday 3 by-elections announced for the 13th of April, 2 in the Toronto area, including Chrystia Freeland's old riding, 1 in Quebec, where the Supreme Court annulled last year's federal election result that saw the Liberals winning by 1 vote over the Bloc. Ryan, if the Liberals win all 3, they get a majority. Do you think they can do that?
I think they can. Liberals I talk to say that it's within their reach. They're very confident about the Toronto ridings, which they have every reason to be. They won those ridings with, double-digit margins in the last election. So I think those are relatively safe. Terrebonne is where it's all going to happen. I mean, if you can't get excited about Canadian politics under this circumstance, you're not trying. A by-election to decide a majority government that was decided by a single vote in the last time they ran it, that's going to be a very interesting race. If you live on Terrebonne, expect to have your door knocked on multiple times for weeks on end. I'm sure voter turnout is going to be in the high 90s because they're going to drag everyone they can to the polls. But yeah, it's going to be a fascinating election.
Rosie, what do the Liberals have to do to win that riding in particular? That's no disrespect to the ones in Toronto, but that one, to Ryan's point, is one that I think a lot of people will be paying very close attention to.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the polls show right now that the Liberals are doing very well in Quebec. Part of that might be that the Parti Québécois is still leading in the polls in Quebec, still talking about a referendum, even though Quebecers are not interested in that. Sometimes that plays to the Liberals' advantage. I think that might be the case there. They're doing a couple of other smart things. Advanced polls for those by-elections will happen over the Easter long weekend, which, to Ryan's point, will help get voter turnout up. And finally, they're doing it after their own convention, which is being held in Montreal. So they will sort of be in the headlines for a couple of days in that province as well. So there's a lot of tools there that the government is drawing on to try to secure that riding. That's the one thing we haven't mentioned through all of this with the Prime Minister's muddying or evolving position or whatever we want to say and being out of the country for 10 days. He continues to lead by double digits in the polls. And I realize, it doesn't matter. There's not an election. And if they get their 172, maybe, an election's out for some time. But Canadians have a lot of patience. And they're giving him a pretty long leash, I would say, for the Prime Minister. This is an awfully long honeymoon for the Liberal leader at this point.
Okay, we have a minute and a half left. I wanted to shoehorn this in because I think Steph mentioned, it's been 1 year exactly since Mark Carney became the Prime Minister. Rosie, what is one word that you would use to describe what the year ahead could look like for Mark Carney?
Oh, God. I hate it when you do these. I wish someone would give me a heads up. Okay.
I just did. You have seconds to go.
Unpredictable. Unpredictable.
Ryan?
Turbulent, just like the first year.
Steph?
They stole my words. I hate this too. I still regret the last time we did this. Yeah, I'm just going to go with who knows, man. It's not one word, but who knows?
Who knows, man? It's kind of the feeling that a lot of people have around these days right now. Thank you all for playing. We won't keep those on tape and play them back in the years ahead, will we? Yes, we will, of course. Good to speak with you. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Rosemary Barton, the CBC's chief political correspondent, the host of Rosemary Barton Live. Stephanie Levitz is a senior reporter in the Globe and Mail's Ottawa Bureau, and Ryan Tumulty is a political reporter with the Toronto Star.